I'm here today with James Holzhauer. Welcome, James. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Tell me how you learn bridge.
I would read the comics section of my newspaper after I was done with the sports, and there was this little column there with some hand diagrams, and I was like, "What is this?" And I didn't really know anyone who played bridge. I think most people of my generation they learned from their parents, grandparents, whatever. There was really no one to teach me, but I was kind of fascinated by these diagrams, and I kind of learned eventually how to read them and bought myself a couple of bridge books. I remember there was Watson's on the play of the hand, Phil Root's How to Defend a Bridge Hand, and I, read these books and thought I'm awesome at this game. And oh boy, it's a long road from thinking you're awesome to actually becoming decent at the game.
Yeah, so what
I,
was what was that journey like from, reading a bridge column in a bridge book to actually becoming a strong player?
so I started tossing some cards. I was like in high school at the time, and I go to say a math team contest, and we needed something to do while we were waiting for the competition to start. Basically, play what we thought was bridge and very basic stuff, but kind of learned the mechanics of the game. When I was a freshman in college, I started a bridge club in my school because I wanted to grow interest in the game around there. And it worked well for about a month. And then someone brought a box of poker chips in and we tried playing poker instead. And that was the end of the bridge club for a while. It's funny though, I actually, so I went to the University of Illinois and several of my classmates there who were in the card players club with me all moved out to Vegas for their own reasons. I live in Vegas now, and we still get together. Actually, last night I just played some kitchen table bridge with these guys who I've been doing this for over 20 years with now. Kind of amazing. Really, I would say I didn't get good at the game until 2019. Was on Jeopardy then, and right after Jeopardy aired, the national was in Las Vegas. So I wasn't going to every national back then, but this one was in my backyard. I was there for most of the days, and a bunch of top players. Ralph Katz comes up to me and says, "Hi, I want to teach you some stuff about bridge." Jeff Extras, like, I want to teach you some stuff about bridge, and like, what an amazing opportunity this was. And I've grown by leaps and bounds since then, I'll say.
Wow. So what was that mentorship like? What did they want to teach you?
I don't know. So let's see. I'll say I was decent at card play already because I had a lot of practice with like Gib on bridge base and things like that. And you can kind of learn most of the card play techniques there. Now, you don't grow your table presence this way, of course, but my bidding was very primitive. The idea of you're having a conversation with your partner and what is he telling you? What is he not telling you? That's the kind of thing you need to play with people who are better than you, have them kind of teach you things as you go. It's not the kind of thing you can get from bidding with a computer for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to play like every national and a bunch of regionals now and doing my best when I can to find someone who's better than me who will partner me and just, tell me, hey, here's a thing you can grow in your game. Everyone's got their own little suggestions. I know Ralph is a big advocate of downgrading when you have like ace king queen tripleton. He claims it works every time if you subtract a point for that. I don't know if that's 100% mathematically accurate. Let's see. Mexstroth was trying to extol the virtues of a 9-card trump fit for an 8-card one to me. Taking that to the bank so far.
So how formal has that mentorship been with those guys? Like, have they just been like, here's a tip every now and then, or have they played with you, given you lessons?
Yeah, I've so let's see. Mech and I played during the pandemic. I think we were doing like a once a week online game. It was just a speedball or something, but even in a low caliber game, you can learn a lot of stuff by watching the master at work. Actually, David Berkowitz and I still play an online game every week, and there's fewer and fewer things he needs to teach me as we go along, but I still think there's still like a lesson, and every time you play an 18 board tournament or someone with a really good player, they can find something to give you a tip for next time. I don't say anything is formal. I think this is kind of an interesting. I still do not feel super comfortable in the ecosystem of, I'm not really a client. I'm not a professional. I'm kind of like walking somewhere in between, and I don't want to bug someone whose time is very valuable unless they approach me. But sometimes some amazing offers have come by. Kerry Sanborn offered to play a couple of national events with me. What an amazing experience that was! I played a regional with Ralph last summer, and yeah, you just like take the opportunities where you get them is my philosophy.
That's amazing. How much post-mortem discussion do you have with these guys when you play with them?
I would say it depends on who I'm playing with. I played a couple of events at the most recent national with Fred Stewart. Fred loves to talk about every little detail, and I think there's something to be learned in that. But not everyone is like this, and I don't want to bug that. I think my overarching principle is don't be a pest. If you can avoid being a pest, it's better. But yeah, there are some people want to talk about everything, and others, they just want to move on with their day, and both things are fine. I think. I tend to, if I have a specific question, I tend to always at least email the person afterwards and get an answer to that.
Do you have a go-to person when you just have a general question, like a mentor who's like, should I bid with this, or what's the right agreement after this transfer or whatever? Like, do you have that go-to person?
It's kind of a tricky thing because I found if there's one thing I found by asking really good bridge players, everyone is convinced that the majority of people do it their way and that their way is clearly better. And the consensus is not really a consensus. But I will say, like my go-to people when I have a question, I have a few people, a few pros who live in Vegas and I'm friends with. Dan Corbell, Josh Don, Aaron Jones. They're all good to go to with these questions. And you sometimes get strong opinions that maybe should not be so strong, but there's always something good to think about when I ask them.
At a tournament, what is your routine like? Do you have any habits or superstitions or just anything you do that you think contributes to success at the table?
I would say one of my big things, I am a big soda drinker. If it's convenient to stay at a hotel other than the host, I like to get up in the morning, go walk through to a convenience store, and this gives me some air and some, I don't know, light exercise getting out there. I don't sleep great in hotels, so that I think one big thing is just trying to make sure that I get enough sleep at night. But routines, I don't know. I like to get a good dinner, and if my partner wants to talk about the hands at dinner, that's great. If they don't, that's fine too. I don't know that I have a set routine. I would say
Do you do anything in the weeks, months before a big tournament to get ready?
it's interesting. Some partners they want to really prepare for these things harder than others. For maybe 6 or 7 nationals in a row. I've played at least an event or two with Stefan Skorchev, who runs Interbridge. He lives in Bulgaria, and so there's a time difference. There's other issues. He doesn't want to have a big chat about our methods or anything. We just try to play a fairly simple system, have few agreements but firm agreements in that regard. Just try to avoid major mess ups that way. And I think there's something to be said for that. There are bidding accidents that can only happen to people who have 1,000 pages of notes. And on the other side, as I said, I played with Fred Stewart, and he likes to. He actually printed up a copy of our notes and was studying it in the hotel room. And good for him. He gets a kick out of that sort of thing. I think there's merits to both approaches.
As you've gotten better at bridge, do you think that what separates you from the top players is mostly bridge skill, or at the table focus, concentration, that non-bridge?
I've sort of seen up close the difference between a professional and an amateur. On some of the game shows I've been on, there's a game show called The Chase where the conceit is they have a team of 3 amateur contestants playing against one trivia professional, and you just kind of see that people who do this for a living, they can be on another level because they have the time to devote to. It's not so much that they find a complex squeeze that often. It's just that they're so such professionals, they don't get the somewhat difficult hands wrong ever. And I think, like, when you're in a trivia competition, the trivia pro just always gets the moderate difficulty questions right. It's not necessarily about getting the hardest ones. So I would say there's just a gap there, and these people have more time to devote to this than I do. Although, I found I haven't done a trivia show in like a year or something, and I'm not really in the process of reviewing my flashcards, and I kind of feel like I have brain space that can be, changed from memorizing world capitals to memorizing bidding systems now. I'm not a, neuroscientist or anything, but I think that there's definitely some merit to the idea that you can use your brain for one thing or the other, but it can't necessarily do both. I remember I flew straight from a taping of Jeopardy to New Orleans to play an ABC event with Carrie Sanborn, and I just like had a couple situations where I could not remember what bids meant because my brain was in trivia mode, and I think there's something to be said for like the less baggage you have going on in your day to day life, the more you can avoid issues at the bridge table.
What did your training for Jeopardy look like?
It was intense. So Jeopardy tends to ask about a very wide range of subjects, but if you actually look at it, most of the questions are not that hard. So when I was a kid, I would watch and I would say like, oh, all these sports questions are so easy, but these opera questions are so impossible. How could anyone possibly know that? And it turns out that's not really the case. It was just I was watching sports all the time. I never went to the opera, and you can take yourself. I've still have never been to an opera in my life, but I get most opera questions correct on the show because there's only let's say there are 30 operas that are famous enough that viewers at home have heard of them, and they're going to ask about those 30. They're not going to ask about some obscure one. You can kind of there's like an online archive of all the clues they've ever asked about on the show, and you can kind of search the database, see like, okay, they'll talk about Carmen, but they won't talk about some obscure opera no one's ever heard of. So okay, who's the composer of Carmen? Who are what's the basic plot line? Where is it set? Who are what are the names of a couple main characters? And boom, like if you can do that for now, you have to do that for like all the operas and all the Shakespeare plays and things like that. But it can be done. You can take yourself to be Jeopardy competent at a category you just otherwise have no interest in. But it takes a lot of effort. I'll say that.
So you said flashcards. How did that work? What was the training with those like?
So they have like apps that are designed. They call it spaced repetition. So you can have, let's say you have 1,000 flashcards in your deck. If you are always getting one of them right, it won't ask you about it for another month or say. But like if you keep getting one wrong, they'll keep bringing it up and say, kind of hammering the point home. And I don't know about whether this is effective, but I think some people think it works. There must be a reason they're doing it this way. But yeah, it's the idea is just kind of, hey, here's a subject you're good at. Let's not focus your training on that. Let's focus instead on what things can you improve upon. So I guess the bridge analog would be, I'm a better player than bidder, so most of my practice sessions are devoted to bidding and trying to think about like, anticipate situations that don't come up very often.
Do you think that flashcard methodology has some analog into bridge? Like, do you think that would be an effective method?
So I think this could be the problem. I don't know how you would translate auctions to flashcards exactly, but maybe let's say you had system notes, you could write in, or if you're trying to learn a new convention, let's say Fred Stewart and I are playing Gazilli, and I've never played Gazilli before. I think there could definitely be some merit to putting some flashcards in. Okay, what does it mean when it goes one of a major, one no trump, two clubs, two diamonds, something like that, and just remember making sure that you have the bread and butter situations down. Now, you
Yeah,
can't possibly predict every auction you're ever going to see, but if
sure.
you have an agreement like, I opened a strong club, my partner bid a suit, we're in a game force now, and so we have different ways to show different hands in this spot.
Yeah. How many hours a day were you spending training for Jeopardy?
I would say it varies. When I know a taping is coming up, maybe I don't know 4 or 5 hours a day. But in day to day life, it was more just like, okay, I'll review some flashcards before bedtime, something like that. But it's kind of hey, I'm gonna need this in the near future. I'll put more time into it. They have a primetime series they're doing right now. The tapes once a year. So if I knew a taping was coming up in a month or two, then I'd hit the books kind of hard. But other than that, it was not a heavy priority to me day to day wise.
So if I said to you, I'm going to pay you to become a professional bridge player, the best bridge player you can be. And I want you to treat it as a 9 to 5 job. And your job this year is to get better at bridge. What do you think your days would look like?
That's interesting. I mean, I would probably just see. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how much you're paying me, I guess. If I could take that money and hire Mextroth to practice with me 5 hours a day, that probably would be the best way to do it. Honestly, I don't know. It's a good question. So look for high level games. I would say is the first part. So oftentimes my schedule dictates that when I play online, it just has to be a random ACBL game on Bridge Base or something like that. But when I can, I try to play against like Richard Pavlicek. There's always high level players in that game, or the Schaefer Invitational game on Bridge Base. Playing against people who are better than you and with people who are better than you, I think is the real key, because you can only learn so much if you're not playing in high level games. Yeah, good players will give you problems when others wouldn't.
If you had 5 hours of Mextroth's time during a day, how much of that would you want to spend playing and how much talking and going over the hands you had just played?
I mean, as I said, my card play is well ahead of my bidding, but I think there are situations where like subtle differences in defensive carding, I think are good to go over. But yeah, I think a lot of it would be spent on bidding practice and trying to. I suppose it would be even better if I could get opponents also get three people to bid together and like if you and a pro bid against two robots, the robots aren't going to give you bidding problems the way that good opponents will. So that probably would be the best use of it.
So you would try to get four people at a table, three very good players, and just bid the hands
I,
and get some feedback.
and again, this is specific to me. It depends. I mean, some people are probably better bidders than card players and could benefit more from analyzing specifically. Like, okay, here's a line that's 58% to make this contract, and this one is 62, and here's why. And those things add up. I will say, like, I don't know if this pertains to your question, but I'm very scared of the idea. So I have had an unconventional life. When I was in college, I was kind of playing poker to make money, and then I became a professional sports gambler, and that was to make money. And then I became like basically a professional trivia player, and that was to make money. And now we're up to like three things that the rest of the world considers hobbies, and I turned into a job, and like something was lost there. Like these things should be fun side activities, not professions. And I'm very concerned about bridge becoming this kind of thing for me. So I think like if it's still a hobby that is fun for me years down the line, I will have succeeded.
Do you still read a lot about bridge?
I love bridge books. I have a shelf full of them. My wife keeps asking me, "Do we really need more of these for Christmas?" But they're kind of like the one tangible item I still enjoy unwrapping.
There some favorites?
Okay, so the things I read the most often are definitely the Victor Molo Menagerie books, which they do have some practical advice in them, but it's kind of more just here's the fun side of the game and the personalities you encounter at the table, and it's very very enjoyable reading. In terms of like things that have really helped my game, I would say let's see the Kelsey books on killing defense at bridge. They really hammer home the point of hey, you need to count every hand. Here's some ways to follow along with the play better. Oh, here's how you can help your partner with signals, things like that. And I think that defense is often the hardest part of the game for people because they struggle with these ideas.
Are there things at the table that you feel like you do better than others in terms of concentration, like seeing the spot cards or taking the inferences, picking up on body language, anything like that?
Well, I mean, I think I'm better at all of these things than your typical club player, but I have many, many fewer years of experience than a Hammond or someone like that. So I'm, that's not how I'm going to beat Bridge Pro who's been doing this for 30 years. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting better at this every time I play. I'll say that.
How would you assess your own ability?
I think I once asked my partner, where do you think I stand in the bridge world, and he suggested somewhere between like the 500 and 1,000th best player in the world. And okay, that seems reasonable to me. I don't know how you would go about a granular ranking of these things, but I have last year I think I placed in the top 20 in 4 or 5 NABC Plus events, which yeah, it's hard to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's similar to where I am. There's the elite Mextroth level, right? There's only a few of those. And then there's the level below that. And then there's the level below that. And I call that like expert world class and like out of this world.
Hmm.
And, I'm trying to figure out what differentiates each of those classes. How much of it is just technical bridge knowledge, and how much of it is about getting the most out of your ability at the table. Do you have any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
So yes, I think that it is more the second part, just making sure you don't fall asleep and have a lapse, because those lapses are costly. And really, like knowing how you play a card combination differently when you have the 9 instead of the 8, that's not the kind of thing that's going to win you a session. But making sure you're always playing your A game it absolutely will win that for you.
As a trivia person and a poker player, I imagine that it's similar, that getting the most out of your game is as important, if not more so, than just skill and knowledge. So, how do you get to the best place, when you're playing poker or on Jeopardy, so that you can get the most out of your talent?
Well, I guess I'll say one thing, especially at poker, it's really important. We have a term going on tilt. This is someone just let's say they got really lucky and beat you out of a big pot, and if you can concentrate and still play your best game, even though in your head you're like, oh, this bleep just beat me out of this pot. Oh, I want to get back at him so bad. But if you can put that out of your head and play your best game moving forward, I know like Bob Hammond is famous for this attitude, right? Just next hand. We can talk about this later, but for now, let's win the next board, not try to go back and win the last one. And I think like on a Jeopardy, for example, you don't have time to sit there and stew about a question you should have gotten right or whatever. It's the game moves too fast. You just got to reset, play your best game, and moving forward. And yes, this is a thing that definitely helps separate the elite players in the world, is they're able to do this.
Is that something you've gotten better at over time, especially at poker, like not getting on tilt?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I think it depends. You know what I think about bridge is that it moves at a pace where you can sit there and stew, and this can mean trouble for some people. I don't know if anyone listening knows this. Jeopardy does a thing where they tape 5 episodes a day, and people have talked about like kind of the mental fatigue they feel at the end of. And actually, there's physical fatigue too. You're standing up for this whole time. I actually did a lot of leg stretches when I was on stage, and I think this might have been a tangible benefit to me. But people have asked me, at the end of a taping day, aren't you kind of mentally fatigued? And I thought no for Jeopardy. Honestly, it moves so fast, you kind of just feel like you're in the flow of the game. But bridge, like at the end of a day, it's a national tournament. I do feel mentally exhausted because you have these spots where you can sit there and think for a couple of minutes, and it's like going through all the possible combinations in your head for a suit, for example. It really grinds you down at the pace it goes, in a way that I feel say Jeopardy doesn't. Poker I think could do the same thing for you though. If you ever watch poker on TV, you see people sit there and think for a few minutes, and yeah, it wears you down. So I think just having the stamina to get through say 10 days of that in a national tournament is a big factor.
Do you think physical fitness plays a part in that? Like when you were doing Jeopardy, did you consider that part of your training, diet, exercise, anything like that?
So I don't eat well when I'm under stress. So like honestly on a taping day of Jeopardy, my lunch would often be like a slice of pizza and a candy bar or something like that, because I knew I needed calories to get through the day. And if it's a struggle to eat, at least let's get something calorie dense that I know I can get through a few bites of. So I don't know that I can be pointed to as a model of that. I do try to exercise a decent bit, and I think that it probably helps you get through the day to have some level of fitness.
What about at a bridge tournament in terms of diet and exercise?
So at a bridge tournament, I feel like I typically eat a little better, but often I will skip a breakfast or something just because I'm not feeling it. But I do try to get a little, maybe it's just push ups and sit ups in my hotel room, but I do try to get a little exercise every day. Maybe it helps.
Are there certain mistakes that you find yourself making time and time again, certain types of mistakes?
I will say a thing that, I don't have a regular partner at the moment. Often, I'll play one tournament with a different person than the last one. And, there are sometimes issues where you get through an auction and you're thinking like, okay, do I know everything my partner knows here? Because maybe your system is different than you're used to. So I think that these kind of things can be solved by playing with the same person over and over. But often it's tricky to kind of know, like let's say you think you're playing a kickback or something, but your partner gives an impossible response to your ace ask. Now you have to ask, okay, what does he think is going on here? These things I think don't come up so often for Bexroth and Berkowitz type partnerships.
Are there any memory exercises or anything that you've ever done to, I mean, I'm thinking more about your trivia career. Are there memory exercises, just kind of general memory that you do or that people do in that world?
Interesting. I don't really know. I kind of feel like the people who are high level trivia players, they, at some point in their lives, they realized they were good at memorizing this useless information. I don't know that I do general memory exercise. I think I just have a generally good memory, and I have kind of learned what sticks with it. I will say, there are people who like. Let's say that I was a huge fan of The Simpsons back in the 90s, and if something was referenced on The Simpsons, I'm much more likely to remember it than anything else that's randomly. I know Pagliacci is the opera about clowns because it came up on a Seinfeld story arc once. There is an element of let's relate this to something that's interesting to me.
What, like people who struggle with hand visualization and counting out the hand and things like that. What sort of advice would you give them? What have you done in your leveling up to get better at those skills?
I'd imagine this is kind of dependent on the person, but I think just, every time you get a new piece of information, work it into what you know about the hand already. So, opponents open a weak two bid. Okay, they probably have six. They might have five, but they probably have six of that suit. And now you've already got a good baseline to start from. And, if that hand later roughs the second round of a suit, okay, we know exactly one there, probably six in the other two suits, and just kind of get in the habit of doing this as you go. You don't want to be sitting there at trick 12 trying to remember what was played. Just kind of go as you go. It's much easier to process information as it's being recorded rather than trying to remember back to what happened six tricks ago.
Are you a competitive person by nature?
Yes, I would say I'm definitely a competitive person by nature, but at the same time, I would rather have a good time than win the event. I would rather let me rephrase. I would rather play my best and have a good time than win the event. That's more important to me is that I'm happy at the end of the session rather than holding the trophy. I feel like people have told me stories about, oh, my partner and I won this pair game, but we were at each other's throats the whole time, and like that was not a successful day at the office to me.
Would you say that you love winning more or hate losing more?
I really think what gets me is like knowing that I could have done better at something. Like there are times where you're in a match and the opponents are just playing lights out, and you would just have no shot of winning. And okay, what I can do is I can not make terrible mistakes here, and if I avoided any terrible mistakes, and making no mistakes at all in a bridge session is just an impossible goal. I don't worry about that, but trying to avoid obvious blunders and think about things you can do better next time. But yeah, if I played a session with only minimal mistakes and pretty small ones, I'm happy, win or lose.
So, say you enter the Vanderbilt and you draw the nickel team in the second round. What's your mindset going into that match? What are you telling yourself?
I'm just there to play my best, and probably, a mathematician would tell you, okay, we are big underdogs here. We need to take some chances. Maybe, like let's say I have a 9 card trump fit. Maybe I'll play for the finesse instead of the drop because I know we need to generate some swings here, that kind of stuff. But I'm there to take my tricks and not do anything silly. That's the mindset I have going into basically any bridge thing. If there's opportunities for brilliant plays, great, but most of the time you're just there to do the ABC stuff right, and that will get you most of the way. And maybe you'll get lucky.
How does bridge compare for you with poker and trivia just in terms of challenge and enjoyability?
Let's see. Well, I think it's more enjoyable to me than gambling or trivia at this juncture. But as I said, like there's kind of a trajectory where those things became jobs at one point. And I can't say I'll never play professional bridge at some point in my life, but I don't want it to be a job. I want it to be a thing I enjoy, and the challenge is what draws me to the table. A bridge hand is like a puzzle in ways that those other things are not, and I kind of enjoy the challenge of solving a different puzzle every time I get dealt cards.
Are you a puzzle person? Do you like crosswords or anything like that?
Yes, I'm often doing crossword or Sudoku or something like that. I love that kind of stuff.
But not competitively.
I
Not
think
yet.
that I'm at a level. I don't think I'm at a level where I could do that, but maybe one day. I don't know. Again, you're turning a fun thing into a not fun thing.
Absolutely. How does the partnership aspect of bridge differentiate it from those other pursuits?
Honestly, there's good lessons for life in being a bridge partner. So you kind of learn to see things through the eyes of another person, and you're going to make mistakes. Your partner's going to make mistakes, and if you, first of all, like if you can be a good partner and not, your partner already feels bad if they know they did something wrong. There's no reason to pile on, and I think there's like more lessons for life than specifically bridge, and being a good partner and understanding like, hey, having empathy, like, okay, so what? There was a screw up. Let's get him next time.
Why do you think robots in bridge are so much worse than humans, so much worse than in chess and other games?
I'm under the impression that like in single dummy declaration, robots are quite good, but there's some issues. So I suppose I can, I have most of my experience playing with Gib on bridge-based robot tournaments, so I'll talk about some of the issues Gib has. For example, let's say you have an auction where you open one no trump and partner asks statement and you bid 2 diamonds. So the robot just says, okay, there is, this hand has 15 to 17. He does not have a 4 card major, and you can like the hand can play out where it turns out that I had 13 and 6 hearts, and the robot will not properly assimilate this information because you screwed with its basic inputs already. So those kind of situations, a robot's going to adjust a lot worse than a human player will. First of all, I mean, the human is going to know, okay, this guy does this kind of stuff with 13 and a six yard heart suit. I'm going to adjust playing against him in the future, and the robot never does this. But also, there's just a complexity in auctions. I mean, bidding is really where the robots' major screw ups tend to happen. They, are just very poor at complex auctions, and how could they be good? Programming in the all the inputs would be very difficult, I think. Um, yeah, and also I don't know whether there are more advanced robots that are good at this, but like Gib doesn't do defensive carding, and how are you supposed to have a conversation with your partner if they just play their spot cards at random and things like that? So this is definitely an issue. I mean, that I think could be fixed.
Do you think it's
Right.
mostly something inherent to the game itself that it's just hard for computers to figure out, or just that we haven't put a lot of resources into it?
I think it's both. I believe that if someone spent thousands of hours, someone who is both a bridge expert and a computer programming expert spent thousands of hours programming, they could probably make a robot that bids decently. But still, it's going to encounter problems it's never thought about before. What are its agreements with its robot partner, and can those be hard coded in? There's just so many subtleties in the bidding space, particularly. I think that would be difficult. I mean, yeah, I think if you put a computer against a human declarer right now in a single dummy problem, the computer would do just fine. That's the kind of thing that is much easier to go through mathematical stuff, simulations, things like that.
How are computers at poker? I have no idea.
This is a kind of an interesting trajectory. So in the late 2000s, they introduced this machine at the casinos that would play like heads up Texas Hold'em against you. There was no they call it the rake or the vig. There was no money being taken out of the pot for the house. And it's my friends were like, hey, I can beat this machine for like $40 an hour plus get some casino comps. It's not bad at all. And the machine was playing okay, but not great. The best human players could do just fine against it. And now the best humans are just like no shots. I don't know if the gap is quite as much as in chess. Like, no human should be trying to play this computer heads up for money. It's just too good at randomization and everything. Yeah, it's gotten to that point where I mean, heads up poker is kind of a more specifically like mathematical game. Like, okay, I will bluff exactly 37.4% of the time in this spot, that kind of stuff. But I think even in multiplayer games now, the computers are beating the humans, and yeah, probably poker is just a lost cause for that humans versus computers thing. I think we got some time in bridge until they devote more resources to getting them to bid better.
And is that what happened between then and now? Is they just put more time and resources into it and the computer got
Well,
better?
so I mean, again, I'm not working for these companies, but I'm under the impression that the computer, there was machine learning going on when it played against the humans, but also what a computer can do is it can play against itself billions of times and kind of learn like, okay, this strategy works, this one doesn't. And like, I think in bridge this would be more challenging because you encounter different bidding systems. How do you react to opponents playing a completely bizarre bidding system you've never done before? I think this would be more of a struggle to optimize against every possible opponent the way that you could in poker.
Any other advice that you might give me or my listeners who are trying to get better this year?
Play with people who are better than you. Play against people who are better than you. Have an open mind when someone suggests you could do something differently. Be good to your partner. Yeah, I kind of think that it's everyone's situation is different, but someone out there is better than you at some aspect of the game, regardless of who you are, and you can probably improve by listening to them.
I agree with all of that. All right, James, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks for having me.